I'm honored to introduce the Smart Cities panel presented by Jacobs. I'd like to bring up Phil Bonas, the moderator.
Thank you, Steve. Good afternoon, everybody. Phil Bonas, Director of Intelligent Infrastructure for Jacobs Engineering. Got a panel today here with a bunch of the guys that Jacobs has done a lot of work with recently for smart city deployments across the country. So real briefly, I'll just introduce them. We've got Avi Patwardhan from Jacobs. He is the VP Global Smart City Deployments for us. Ashok Tepernini, he is the head of products for smart cities for Qualcomm. And last but not least, we've got Brandon Brahan, who is the CTO and Deputy City Manager for the city of Peachtree Corners in Georgia. Real quickly, I just wanted to play a very short clip for you all of a recent deployment that we did down in Peachtree Corners for a CV2X project, CV2X being cellular vehicle communications. Want to just show that real quick, and then we'll jump into the panel discussion.
Qualcomm and Peachtree Corners have joined together to deploy CV2X technology at the Curiosity Lab in Peachtree Corners, Georgia. CV2X, or Cellular Vehicle to Everything, is the platform for vehicles to communicate with each other, as well as everything and everyone around them. A 360-degree non-line of sight situational awareness is provided via two modes, direct and network. Direct mode includes vehicle to vehicle, vehicle to infrastructure, and vehicle to pedestrian. The network mode is a vehicle to network system providing non-CV2X information in the environment like traffic guidance and avoidance, weather, and emergency notifications via traditional networks, as robust 5G networks, artificial intelligence, and forward-thinking companies like Qualcomm and Jacobs coalesce around great ideas to bring about better, smarter, and safer transportation solutions. The future of automotive intelligence is accelerating at the Curiosity Lab.
Perfect. So we were having a discussion earlier about how difficult it is to actually convey to people what these projects are all about. So with further ado, what I want to do is start off, and Avi, why don't you explain to everyone what you consider to be a smart city deployment?
Hey, good morning, folks. So there are 1,000 definitions out there of what a smart city means. The best definition, or one of the best definitions, what people have heard, this is from Mayor Benjamin out of Columbia, South Carolina. What he's saying is we have so many assets on the streets. First of all, we need to connect them with sensors, and then we need to leverage that technology to benefit our citizens. He said the end game is the citizens. The cities are built for the people and the citizens to live there. And if that factor is not included, the eliminating digital divide, the digital inclusion, improving jobs, reducing traffic congestion, that's what, according to Mayor Benjamin, is a smart city. And he said the smart city requirements will change from east to west to north to south within a city because the requirements of the citizens are different in different parts of the city.
Thanks, Avi. And we'll get a little bit more into the specifics of really what constitutes a smart city at the end of the day and how you define that. Brandon, as Peachtree Corners is on the forefront of smart cities, when we look across the country, nationally, a lot of what people will say is, well, hey, who's actually deployed a smart city? And the list is short. Peachtree Corners is obviously probably literally at the forefront for that. So how have you been able to accomplish what no other city has really been able to accomplish so far?
Yeah, thanks, Phil. Good question. What we've seen and what we're able to do is kind of really get out of our own way. We know government, right? Government's not known for innovating. We're not the best innovators out there. Is that better? So what we do know that government's really good at is owning and operating infrastructure. So what we did was we opened up Curiosity Lab at Peachtree Corners, which is a 5G-enabled living laboratory. We put in the infrastructure to support advanced mobility, smart cities, and IoT testing on a real-world street. And then we have stepped back and opened that up to the private sector to come and use the facility to either test or demonstrate products in a real-world setting. And that's allowed us to partner with companies such as Qualcomm to really push forward innovation around technology that can help benefit cities in the future and today. We've been able to do things from pushing out at level 5 autonomous shuttles on public streets to integrating 5G into camera-based systems for video analytics, and then most recently connecting vehicle to everything and vehicle to pedestrian technology.
Thank you, Brandon. Before we get into some of the other questions with respect to the technology that's been facilitating this, from a financial perspective, we know that deploying smart cities, there's not a city in the country that has enough money to deploy a smart city. You all have actually been able to get funding, and so let me ask you, how have you guys funded your smart city deployments, and is that the model for other cities to follow, or other alternatives perhaps that you're actually looking at that may be better?
Yeah, we took a different approach to this. We have actually funded everything locally, so all local dollars, and we've opened the environment free to use. So it's an economic development initiative for the city. And what that does is it opens up a business environment that businesses want to come and relocate to. We've been successful in that, and that in turn generates sales tax, business license, additional fees and taxes that come to the city, which help us then invest more money into this technology.
Sure. Yeah. And I know, Avi, we'll get into P3 funding maybe a little bit in a bit and how best to approach that. Right now, I do want to ask Ashok, from a communications connectivity technology, a lot of people are asking, all right, so you've got a smart city. How do you provide the connectivity that's required to deploy a smart city? And this may not be a one-shot answer, but from Qualcomm's perspective, what's the best technology to deploy to facilitate smart cities?
Sure, thank you. A smart city can only be as smart as the connectivity underneath it. You can have multiple technologies all deployed, but if they're not talking to each other or not even talking to the sensors that are creating the basis for this connectivity, then you're not leveraging the best of it. So to me, a smart city can only happen when we have that backbone of connectivity. Now, in reality, it will not be a homogeneous one technology providing every sense of connectivity in case. It will be a heterogeneous network, and this heterogeneous networks could be from the operator, could be from private networks, could be proximity-based networks, or things that are tailor-made for vehicles like CV2X that we deployed at Peachtree Corners. As a technology company and an innovation company, we pride ourselves to provide what we call as ABC, always best connected. To me, it doesn't matter what technology we are using underneath, but giving that latency-specific technologies to the market is what will be important for the city.
Yeah, Phil, I like jumping because I think that point can't be overstated enough. None of this technology, doesn't matter what we do, how we roll it out, if there's not the connectivity behind it, it's not going to work. And I think that's what's important for the crowd here is fiber is an important part of that infrastructure, but cities aren't able to scale fiber. It's cost prohibitive for us. So how do we start to bring in the wireless connectivity into areas in the city so that we can enable some of this technology, but it still has to be supported by that connectivity aspect?
All right, so this is more of a loaded question. So we're talking about the fiber, we're talking about the wireless connectivity. Everyone's heard a lot about enterprise private LTE networks over the course of the past year. A lot of companies are deploying it, particularly in carpeted spaces for manufacturing and so forth. Do you see that enterprise LTE/5G networks are going to be critical or important? What role will they play in the deployment of 5G cities, and I guess, or smart cities? Ashok, I want to let you jump in on that first. What are your
Sure.
thoughts?
Sure. If we break down the city into different spaces, let's call it smart airports, smart train stations, smart parks. Now, if I take that as those individual puzzle pieces that I have to connect first, then private enterprise networks, that is enterprise grade private LTE or private 5G, are really going to change the game there. Because now you are in control of the connectivity and the airwaves that an enterprise, even a city, can deploy. Once you deploy that, the private enterprise networks are a game changer, in our opinion. And the technologies in the last couple of years and moving forward has really made it affordable, and also the form factor of these deployments are not as complex anymore. So it is very simplified now that you could become a mini operator by yourself. A city could be its own data operator. So to me, I call it the virtual data operators, where that's what enables a city now to suddenly become, smart.
Yeah, I mean, what we are seeing in this space is a new revenue stream for the cities, which did not exist before. Remember, we have 3 utilities that a city gives of water, wastewater, and power. Well, this is leveraging enterprise network now becomes the 4th utility. Fast forward into smart cities, when you have multiple sensors connected, well, you pay for each of those SIM cards. Now, if you own the network, well, guess what? The cost doesn't exist. So you're eliminating that cost too. So.
Well, I think you bring up a good point, Avi. But so here's, rolling into this, and I'm sure you'll each have your perspective. But we're talking about deploying technology. We're not talking about deploying a bunch of ductile iron pipes or stuff that's static. Now we're talking about deploying technology that has to be operated and maintained, but from a utility perspective. So I guess I would say then, how should a city actually operate and maintain the technology associated with a smart city, as its role is really to facilitate the city operations? And I guess I'd bounce it off you first, Brandon. From your perspective, who's best to operate a smart city?
I think what we've found successful is the public-private partnerships around this, with the technology changing pretty rapidly. I mean, what we put out a year ago has already changed today. So bringing the private and public sector together to manage those systems. We traditionally can manage a dark fiber system that's been in the wheelhouse of a city for decades and hundreds of years. But when we start connecting those end-piece devices that start changing the way our systems operate, that's when we really have to come together and partner together to learn how to operate, maintain it, and future-proof it.
I personally see 2 horizons. The technology is moving at a much faster pace. The cadence, for example, 6 to 8 months to a year. For the initial deployment, a company that is closest to this technology rollout needs to get in first, because they have the experience, they can push something forward quickly. But soon after that, my second wave is when, for long-term operation, it's better for the city to really take ownership of that. So start off with maybe just a private enterprise that can do it, but quickly turn into something that the city can own and manage. That's how I see it moving forward.
Avi, I think you wanted to add something.
Yeah, I think the biggest benefit of the model that Ashok just presented is now you're building new capacity within the city, and you're building a new workforce that wasn't there. So this is what is needed to work in the future. You need that workforce right now who's doing something different to come into this digital age, and that's the best model. is you start with the private side, get the citizens engaged, train them, and then have a joint partnership with them.
Right. So it sounds like the the workforce that cities currently have, the skill sets that they employ is going to migrate. Still have to maintain the existing infrastructure that's out there, but at the same time, going to be migrating to some different skill sets.
Yeah, because city has the most knowledge of its infrastructure, right? They are livid every day. So having them not be a part of it, I think is the biggest mistake we'll make.
Yeah, I agree 100%. What we're starting to see change in our hiring process is, right, 5 years ago, cities didn't hire app developers. We're starting to see that. The focus on IT, security, app development, code, we're actually starting to see those positions come into city folds where before, 10 years ago, it was, do you have the line worker out there that can fix the line, fix the water pipe, and pave the road? Now we're starting to get into the digital side of it, and I think that's where working together to figure out how do we make that transition is really what's going to be able to help us, better prepare for the future and also have the workforce development. And we work with all of our local technical colleges to help them feed the program so that they can start learning this. We've partnered with one of our technical colleges that is developing an autonomous vehicle repair system. As these systems start to come out and operate in the real world, they're going to need someone who knows how to fix them. So how do you manage that aspect as cities start to roll these out in fleets?
Thanks. So we're just going to shift gears a little bit here. We've spent a lot of time over the course of the past couple of years responding and creating proposals to answer the requests for deploying smart cities across the country, across the globe. I think what we've all seen over the course of the past year due to COVID is, hey, we need to, as opposed to the first things that people wanted to do was to deploy smart lighting solutions, the biggest request that we're seeing collectively is, how do you bridge the digital divide, all right? And so I'll start with you, Ashok, on this one. When a city asks Qualcomm, how are you going to bridge the digital divide? What's your answer?
So for us, building the digital divide within the city is very key. And then comes very quickly what the city wants to solve, whether it's lighting, traffic, waste management. That's the priority that the city needs are encapsulated in. And from Qualcomm's perspective, there are products that are and technologies out there that can solve a whole bunch of these problems. So for us, that tight integration between multiple solutions is very, very key. And sometimes we as technology companies forget that. We just do it in silos. But ability to translate that across departments, across solutions is what we strive to do as well. And I'm really hoping that that's what will resonate with the cities. And that's what we want to do.
Okay, so I'll just throw back at you that the digital divide was created due to the cost of providing connectivity, simply put. And so nothing's changed, that there is still a cost of connectivity. But what's the solution say? There must be a way then to fund that connectivity and make it a revenue generating model in order to facilitate that connectivity. What are the solutions that I guess are bolted on that actually provide the revenue to facilitate bridging the digital divide?
Sure. I put that in a couple of streams. Number one is, in order to operate a network, it's not as costly as before because now we have CBRS spectrum, which is free license. So that's number one. So the cost of actually giving the data has gone down.
Sure.
The second one is reimagining how would you even pay for this? Things that come to my mind is, can I monetize the eyeballs for the city-owned infrastructure? There could be kiosks, there could be places where businesses, enterprises are willing to pay for that space. So that could fund the connectivity that could help underserved communities, meet that need. And there are other ways you monetize. For example, operations efficiency in lighting itself could pay for it. Management of traffic within a city with all the tools we have, if I'm able to optimize that and get that efficiency out of that, that is the number of dollars that are now available for the city to fund the digital divide. So there are multiple ways to skin the cat, but it still falls down to really reimagining how we can fund this without, it has to be self-sustaining in the end.
No, I totally agree. And Avi, I'll push this your way. Every model that we've developed includes a component of data monetization. And I think that when we, as a team, collectively present data monetization as a funding solution / model to a city, they're very apprehensive because it seems like you're opening the door to people's deepest, darkest secrets. From a data monetization perspective, what is the most valuable data? And can you even explain to folks, when we talk about data monetization, A, who's paying for it and what are they doing with it?
Yeah, so the data is owned by the city and the citizens of the city. I think that's one of the biggest thing that needs to be communicated. And the second biggest thing is a governance and policy model that has to be put together before you start collecting data. You actually are today collecting data from your water distribution system, from your wastewater collection system, from streetlight energy usage. So that information as data is there. What people are concerned about is the PII data, the personal information. But if you tell them, I'm collecting water leakage distribution so I can minimize the $20 million of water loss that you have every year. Your electrical bills you're paying right now, I can reduce them down by 60%. That's why I'm collecting data to baseline your energy costs. Same is true with parking, same is true with waste. I think we have to be very careful what data we're collecting, what the end use of the data is, and that has to be put in a format that the community understands. Because at the end of the day, if they think that you are collecting something that can be harmful to them, or for whatever reason they think that you are selling it to somebody. Going back to the word Ashok used, operational efficiency. If you tell them we're using this for the city operational efficiency, I think that's where you will get buy-in not only from the city, but all its stakeholders. But that is the hardest thing in a smart city when you start progressing on the data and the data monetization part, is getting those first steps solved before you start doing anything.
From the city perspective, right? Yeah, this is a very touchy subject, right? We're all very concerned with the amount of data that we put out there. How can we use it and anonymize it so that when we do distribute it to potentially monetize it, we're not giving away our citizens' rights and their personal information? Because right, everyone in this room, if you're in the wireless industry, wouldn't you want to know exactly how many cars are driving by the towers that are connecting? Where could I put a new tower in to sell space on? Well, cities are collecting travel data, but how can we strip away the personal information and then sell that back to the tower infrastructure so that they have better informed decisions? But it's a slippery slope, and there's a lot of guardrails that have to be put around it. And so working through that in an RFP model can be challenging for private sector, because it's probably one of the most touchy subjects that's out there right now on how we use data and our data. And then recently with the Colonial Pipeline cyber attack, that kind of opened up a whole new arena for how we're supposed to protect ourselves.
Yeah, well, the city of San Diego deployed countless smart LEDs with cameras, and they've had to turn off the technology due to the concern from the public, right? So I guess what you're saying is, in order to deploy the technology, there has to be a level of community engagement, a community outreach, in order to make sure that people's fears are quelled. Okay.
Yeah, everything we do has the communication aspect behind it so that our residents know all that's going on, what we're collecting, what we're not collecting, to ensure that they're coming along with us, right? Everyone's probably carrying a smartphone in your pocket right now. That's giving away more data than any city's collecting on you on a public street. But we accept that risk when we take that phone. We don't want somebody else being able to use it. So, chicken and egg.
Well, I think that will transition pretty quickly into probably one of my last questions here. And I think what we've seen is a lot of interest in, as we're providing these solutions to different cities, a huge interest in what is your level of cybersecurity that you're going to provide for the deployment of a smart city. And I guess from an IT and an OT perspective, Ashok, you want to tell us, when people say to Qualcomm or yourself, how are you going to ensure, or how are you going to provide the level of cybersecurity that you're not going to shut down an oil pipeline by implementing all this technology? What's your answer?
Absolutely. You see, we talk about IoT sensors, we talk about multiple technologies deployed, but having that under a strong cybersecurity umbrella is extremely critical, especially because we are dealing with the day-to-day, work of the citizens in the city. So, to me, cybersecurity is not something that you at the end of the project. It has to be built from ground up. At Qualcomm, we have something called chip-to-cloud security. What that means is you're able to today do a banking transaction on your cell phone, and you don't even think twice about whether it is digitally safe or cyber secure safe. That's the level of comfort we want to bring to the city for everything that we offer. That means that technology has to be providing ground up, from the chip to the SoC, to the product, to the higher layers, as well as what the city can implement as a policy. That entire piece is where technology can help. But then there is a separate bucket on policies. How do we implement those? What are the policies that we can do? And that needs to be coming in from the public as well. You mentioned about shutting down one of the projects because of the concerns. To me, that's a great proof point that we are listening to the public, right? And we are taking the feedback from them to do something that's right for everybody.
On the cybersecurity, the more IoT sensors you put in, you're giving more access points to everybody and their brother. So it has to be bring right from the ground up. It's not one of the things you can say, oh, no, let me try to put some security solutions.
So we did say that one of the biggest barriers to deployment of a smart city is naturally the funding, how it's going to be funded. Let me ask you, what other barriers have you seen to deployment, and what do you see moving forward, how we're going to overcome them? Start with you, Brandon, as we wrap things up here.
Yeah, funding's a huge part of it, and how you create a program to be able to not only install it but operate it into the future. We're doing creative things through digital kiosks that interact with our residents, through marketing and event marketing, but also connectivity. How are we connecting all these different pieces together? It's a huge barrier. Cost to lay fiber is still pretty expensive, so it's not feasible to run it across a 17 square mile city everywhere without taking a massive amount of debt, and residents don't like that when their property taxes go up, so that's not a viable option. So looking at more creative ways through the use of 5G with some backhaul of fiber. It's still the biggest struggle to figure out is how you're going to support it from an infrastructure and connectivity standpoint.
Yeah, so utilizing some of the latest fixed wireless technologies to keep that cost to connectivity down. Avi, some of the solutions that you've been providing cities, what have they been? What are you seeing most receptive?
Pardon me, didn't get the question. Too much noise, sorry.
With respect to P3s, and do you see P3s as being the silver bullet for deployments?
Well, a couple of the silver bullets that we're seeing for the deployment is, if you ask me, it's a better partnership and understanding between the cities, the clients, and the technology providers. I think what is happening is we have a hammer and we are trying to find a nail within the city. And sometimes there's no nail that you need to hammer. So what you need to do is sit down with people like Brandon and others. What are the issues? What are the stakeholder complaints? What is the reason that you're trying to do what you're trying to do? And use that to develop the solution rather than, I have a solution, can I fit it into your city?
Perfect. All right. So I think we are just about wrapped up. I did want to give just 1 or 2 minutes if anybody in the crowd does have any questions or not. There is a mic up there. If anybody has any questions for the panel up here. If not, we'll wrap it up and go stand in front of the air conditioner.